Hi, Robin. It's Jamie here. I have a miracle story to share with you, and it's called The Car Accident. You are a big part of this miracle story because your loving voice was in my head the whole time that I was experiencing it. So thank you very much for that little plug. And this miracle story is about the car accident. I'd like to say the car accident, but I have actually had so many of them, which is why this particular story was so special to me. Years ago, I think this was actually over 10 years ago, I was studying very deeply with Robin Duncan at the Miracle Center, and I was getting my certification in, various coaching modalities at that time, and I'd been studying hypnosis with you and all of these other wonderful techniques. And we were really deep into our study of A Course in Miracles. I found myself on my way to a workshop. It was a healing workshop to help me overcome fear. And I was so excited about this workshop, and I was on my way on the 10 freeway, and I wound up rear-ending the person in front of me. And the moment that impact happened, I could hear my own mind just berating me instantly, like, how could you do this again? Another accident, and just keep in mind, like, my driving record at this point was just not good. And I felt like I was just a magnet for, any kind of bad thing to your car. So all of these fears just like went through my head so fast. The fear of, is the person in front of me okay? Is their vehicle okay? What happened to mine? Am I okay? What's going to happen to my car insurance? What am I going to do? Am I going to lose my license? All of these things started going through my head so fast. I had that instinct because of all of the work that we'd been doing together, our classes and you and I together and your coaching. I knew that my number one first step, and it was so clear in my mind from practicing it and reading about it, was to pause. Just pause, and just take that step back from the fear thought, and instead just immediately give it to my source. Just hand it over to God and just say, I'm willing to see this differently. And that one line, being able to use that as a life raft in a moment where you find yourself in a traumatic situation and you can't think of a prayer and you can't think of anything else, just, I'm willing to see this differently. Because you are in that moment. It's very true, right? You're definitely willing to see it differently. I also remembered the EEK for emergency prayers that you had taught me years ago. And it was, there is only God. There is only the power of God. There is only the presence of God. And, what is it? Illness, loss, even death are not real. Only the truth is true. I just am willing to see all negative effects of this lifted, and I choose peace instead of this. And I just kept saying that to myself as the steam is like rising up out of my hood. And I'm, the craziness of sitting on a freeway, with all the cars rushing around you and all that hecticness, I had this little moment of peace where I was in this prayer. All this praying took about literally like 30 seconds. It was super quick to just go that prayer. So while I'm kind of praying, the person who I hit came over and, helped me get my car off to the side of the road. And, I had rear-ended him. And he wound up just being so loving and so kind and literally treated me like his daughter, who he was actually on his way to see. He had been driving up from San Diego, and here he was in Santa Monica. He was trying to visit his daughter, and I wound up rear-ending him, and he was driving a truck. My seatbelt kind of had scratched my skin, and he went, I've got some water and a tissue. Let me get that for you. And, I just rear-ended this guy, like in Los Angeles, the most litigious place you can think of. And here's this guy treating me with such kindness, and just, he's so concerned about me. I was apologizing profusely, and I was just, I'm so sorry. And he said, it's funny. I usually drive a Porsche. But my son in San Diego wanted to use my car to impress a girl that he is taking out on a date today, and asked if I would drive his truck to visit his sister today instead. He said, so thank God I was in the truck because there's like a little dent. He's like, that's easily fixed. You know, the Porsche would have been a different situation. So that was a relief. Then I called the insurance company. And again, I had that fear, oh gosh, you know, I can't believe I'm calling with another accident or a loss. And my car, by the way, was completely totaled. I mean, I'm not an insurance expert and I could tell you that. That's how totaled it was. It just was like smushed. She was amazing, the woman that I spoke with on the phone from the insurance company. She was able to give me the steps of what I needed to do, figure out how I would be covered, and she was just right on top of it. Long story short, the gentleman who I hit wound up giving me a ride home. The police had come to check on us, and you know, when you're on the side of the road, they came to check on us, and he said, oh no, we're fine, we're okay, you know, we're going to handle it, you know, through insurance. And he gave me a ride home. It was just very peaceful. The whole experience was peaceful. And you know, when he dropped me off, he was like, please don't worry about this, it's really going to be okay, you know, I'm so sorry about your car. Like, he was more sorry for me, and I just was going, this is wild, I can't believe like all this kindness I'm experiencing. That was like the first miracle. The first miracle was that all of the negativity that I expected to come out of a roadside accident or an accident on a freeway that you see, you know, people screaming at each other, pointing fingers at each other, none of that happened. And I truly believe it's because the moment of impact, when I was faced with my fears of what might happen based off of past experiences or things I've seen happen, that I just didn't engage it. You know, instead I paused it, and I'm willing to see this differently. I did that eek prayer to just be like, no, there's only God. This doesn't have to be bad. This doesn't have to be expensive for anybody. I'm just willing to know that. I don't know how, but I'm willing to know. That little bit of willingness just swung the door wide open on all these miracles to happen. So the first miracle was just how smooth that whole experience was, the accident itself. And then I had to, you know, go home and figure out what I was going to do to get around. You know, I was working at a restaurant at the time, not making very much money. I had like very little in the bank. I had basically been spending all my money on classes and courses to get certified because I was at the time trying to build a healing practice and do hypnotherapy and coaching. And so I was still really deep in those courses. So I had a lot of money going out, but I didn't have a lot of money coming in. I definitely wasn't in a position to buy a new car. And the last thing I wanted to do was get into like another payment plan. Oh, that's the other thing. That car had almost been paid off. I had almost paid it off, and I loved it. It was a Hyundai. You know, I just loved it. I just felt such a sense of ownership of it. So that car had come to me in a miracle story too, by the way. God, that's also one of my favorite miracle stories. And I got in that one because the car I had before it had been stolen. So see, there's like a pattern of lots of loss with cars here. I loved my little Hyundai that got totaled, and I had to figure out how I was going to get back and forth from Los Angeles down to Orange County for my classes, and then how I was going to get to my restaurant job, you know, and how I was going to get to the little office I was renting, which was also like 30 minutes away. It was just there were so many places I had to be, and I didn't know how I was going to do any of it. I had been studying how to co-create and invite and receive miracles. And I'm going to use this experience for the coming of my peace, because that's what my mentor, Robin, always says. I remember her always saying, you know, one of your prayers that I just loved when you'd say, God, please help me use this trauma or this problem or this conflict for the coming of my peace, and not to further solidify this belief in lack or loss, you know, because it's so true. In those moments, you are faced with a choice, and you don't realize it consciously. But it's like you could look at the damage, and you can look at the loss, and all of that feels so real. None of that felt like an illusion at the time. It felt extremely real. To be able to just say, you know what? I'm going to expect a miracle. Why not? And not because I think it's special and I deserve it for being a good person or this, that, or the other thing. I I'm willing to know that this is true. Because if I can experience it, then anybody can experience it, right? I'm not special in that way. We're all children of love, children of God. So if I can experience a shift in my experience and a miracle, then anyone can. What really helped me to be vigilant for peace, the idea that when we have a miracle, we bring others with us, that was very helpful in trying to stay in this mindset. That was another step in this, was just remembering that there's no order of difficulty in miracles. So even like the loss of a car and transportation, I could see that differently. Something can come of that very differently. So I thought this is a really good tangible experience to practice miracles with, because here I am looking at a loss and I'm supposed to practice that this is an illusion. Definitely doesn't feel like it, but okay, I'm going to practice. And so I remembered that one of the things that the Course talks about is how important it is to try to stay in peace of mind as much as you can. And that when you notice the fear thoughts coming up, just be willing to give those to God and just say, I'm feeling scared because I don't know how I'm going to get from point A to point B. I don't know how I'm going to get a new car. I don't know where the money's coming from. I don't have any answers. So I just know I need your help with that because I'm struggling with that. So my next step in the process was to be vigilant for peace, as Robin would say. So I continued to be as present as my miracle principles moving forward. I just chose to focus on the idea that this doesn't need to be a bad situation. Negative outcome does not have to be my result, that suffering is not required, as Robin always says. And that I think was the key, to be honest with you guys, that little mantra, suffering is not required. That was huge because that underlined every single action that I took and every thought that I chose to engage. It was an interesting experience to keep giving this to my higher mind, because normally what I would do is feel like I have to fix it. I have to solve it. I need to ride the insurance company. So I had to really be persistent about turning this over and giving this to my higher mind and asking to be shown how to proceed, because my habitual way of being is to solve my problem myself. I've always had that belief that that's the responsible thing to do. You have to take care of it yourself. To press pause on that, it was a little unnerving at times, but yet peaceful in a different way, because this new approach, I understood any fear I'm having around it is coming from the fact that this is a new behavior, right? I'm just responding to this differently, and I'm not used to that. So I'm going to feel a little trepidation. So it's just all about keeping your peace as you can so that you can hear or feel your guidance as to how to proceed, because it's so interesting. I was doing all these classes, so I had all this homework. And my husband he was my boyfriend at the time. He was an avid beach goer and surfer, and he said, let's go to the beach. This is, I think, the day after the accident. I decided I wasn't going to worry about my situation. And that is huge for me, because I'm a worrier. Just for me to say, I choose not to worry about this. Every time I worry, I'm going to hand it to God. I'm just going to give it to God. And I'm going to do what's right in front of me to do, because that's what my teacher tells me to do. So I had classwork to do. I had things to read. So I was doing that. And he had invited me to go to the beach. And I said, gosh, that sounds so nice. But, I just have so much work to do. I've been talking about the importance of taking care of yourself and, play time and rest time, and that's your way of communicating to the universe that you want more of that, and I'm such a worker bee. I will just stay glued to that, that book or that computer screen. So I wound up going to the beach, and I took my schoolwork with me. I took my miracle books with me, and I thought, well, I'll just study on the beach. And while I was there, I ran into a friend of mine. It's one of those friends who you're such good friends with, but you don't see that often. you know? You don't even really know why you're such good friends because you don't even hang out that much or have known each other that long. But I just love her soul. I love her spirit. So I got to give a big shout out to Kinga because she's amazing. Ran into my friend Kinga on the beach and we were chatting. She was asking me what was new. And I had made a conscious decision not to talk about the accident and losing the car and what I was going to do because I just didn't want to stoke my fear. And sometimes we can get into talking about negative things that are happening in our life, and then it's just that's where your focus is. So I had chosen not to do that, but something compelled me to share with her. And I totaled my car the other day, and she said, "Oh my God, well, what are you going to do?" And I said, I don't know. I said, so far, everything is okay. So far, so good. It's been a couple of days and I'm okay so far. And I'm just going to see how it goes. And she said, well, Jamie, I have a car. It's a beach car. I literally only use it to like drive to and from the beach rodeo. It's beat up. And we actually call it the karma car because anytime a friend of ours has car trouble, we loan it to them. And I honestly don't care if it gets totaled. Like it's not worth anything to have it. She's like, I have it here. And she literally hands me the keys. I'm on the beach. She goes, just take it, drive it home today. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm not going to take your car. And she's like, I have another one. She said, this is my beach car. She's like, Jamie, please let me help you. And she was so just genuine about it. And I was stunned. And that was the other thing. The other miracle was my ability to accept the gift because I felt like I hadn't earned it, and I didn't know how to receive yet. And I just felt going, yes, please say yes. This is part of it. You gave this to me. I'm showing you. Just say yes. So I did. And she's like, Jamie, I do not want to see this car back until you are safely in another car. Like take as long as you need. She was just amazing, just incredible. And how lovely that I got to line up with that person who's such a good teacher of loving generosity. And oh my gosh, right? So there are these angels just showing up everywhere. All of a sudden I had a car and I could get around. Then started to happen was my confidence started increasing because I realized I was being taken care of. A couple days later, 3 days after the accident, my insurance company calls and they're like, well, we wound up getting you $3,000 back, which I was shocked. I thought I was going to like goose egg this little Hyundai. I mean, it was almost paid off, and it really wasn't worth anything. I couldn't believe it. And I thought $3,000 that I can put towards another car. That's so exciting because I only had about $1,000 in the bank at the time. And that was spoken for. So it wasn't going to a car. I couldn't believe it. And the woman was so wonderfully supportive over the phone, the insurance agent. And I remember asking her name and she said, my name is Faith. And I just said, of course it is. Of course it's Faith, and I just thought that just made me want to cry because it was so just, again, like God just coming through in droves. I was like, at this point, I was all in. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm just going to keep on creating a miracle with this. It's already a gentler experience than I've ever experienced because all of my past experiences, anytime I made mistakes, the outcome was so bad and for so long. And there was so much loss and so much sort of punishment involved. And this time there wasn't. And I truly believe it's when the Course talks about that you don't need to punish yourself. Mistakes are wonderful learning opportunities and opportunities for self-forgiveness. And they're not punitive experiences. They don't need to be. This was really my lesson, was this did not need to be punitive. So I was very careful. I continued to be very careful how I talked about my car situation as I was looking for cars. Not everybody is practicing co-creating miracles. Not everybody's on that train. So you got to be somewhat aware of, who and how you talk about it, because sometimes people are quick to like squash it or debate it or go, oh, that's hooey, or you're being some weird Pollyanna. So I just thought, well, I set myself up for that. I'm just going to be very selective who I discuss this with. I started to look for a new car, and I did start to run into those old beliefs that I'm not going to find anything for $3,000, right? That started to be true. I was test driving things that were literally like duct taped together. I'm not even kidding. Like one of the cars that I actually test drove was duct taped to the door. And I was like, this for me, it can't be. It can't be. This makes no sense. Like, how would I get this far? And then this is the crap car that I'm supposed to drive. What? And then, but I kept just like putting it out there. And I got very clear about what I wanted. I said, God, if it's your will that I even have a car, because maybe there's some other situation I'm not even aware of. But if it is your will, then it has less than 40,000 miles on it, and that it's safe and it's comfortable. And I'll just take whatever you think is a good idea because I don't know. I said, I do know that the mileage would be nice. And that was so funny that was like a thing in my head. And that comes back in a minute. I looked and looked and I kept finding things, that just weren't going to do. I started to get discouraged. The thing about that was then I started to push and I started to sort of go, I've got this. I figure out this car situation. And that was when I realized, this is all kind of like I'm seeing more negative things because I'm trying to force this to happen, not in a place of listening at all. And so I had to go, just let it go and just say, God, I'm going to give this back to you. I took it back and I didn't even realize it. So I'm going to give it back to you. And I'm just going to keep focusing on doing what's right in front of me to do. And I thank you in advance that this whole situation is healed. I choose peace. And my husband had a client who had become a really good friend of ours as well. And her husband had this BMW and it had sort of become in their house because they had a son who had just turned 16, was driving age, wanted to drive the BMW. And the dad started to consider maybe selling the car. But what he wanted to sell it for was far more than what I could afford. So I think it was like $13,000 or something he wanted for it. And I was like, I can't really do that. So let that go by. As I continued praying and I just continued moving forward in peace as best as I could, the situation came back around. And my husband's client called again and said, we've decided that we definitely need to let go of the BMW. And we've decided that what we could do is, you said you have $3,000. We can take that and we can just work out, with Michael, maybe who's my boyfriend at the time, now husband. I think they decided on like 4,000 total or something they were going to take. So he wound up doing something for them in the value of like 1,000 and I came up with the 3,000. But here's the interesting thing. When that car was first proposed to me, I left this out. I did go and test drive it. And it was so beautiful and it was so sleek and sexy and amazing. But you see, no one in my family has ever driven a luxury car. And I did not believe that I belonged in one, right? I just didn't. I totaled a Hyundai, for crying out loud, a 2003 Hyundai. Who was I to get in a BMW after that? It just felt like my ego was like, no, you don't. That's for other people, It was interesting that it kind of got taken off the table, and then I went back into my prayer. And as I started test driving these other pieces of junk, I started realizing that, maybe I do deserve something nice and maybe I do need to open up to that idea. So I asked for help with that. And I just said, help me be a good receiver of nice things. I would love to know that that's possible for me. And that's when that BMW came back around. And they said that they would take it for the 3,000. And I had gotten to a place where I really understood the value of that. And I felt absolutely, ready to an amazing experience. I wound up with this BMW for $3,000. And it was, I couldn't even believe it. Oh my gosh, it had, hold on, I wrote it down, the mileage. I think it was 32,000 miles. I was just floored because that whole situation worked out in such a way that if you had asked me at the time of that accident, what do you think is going to happen next? My ego and my mental framework from the past would have told you this is going to be a disaster. It's going to be painful, expensive. I'm probably going to get sued. I'm going to owe money on the car, and I'm probably just going to be taking the bus around LA for the rest of my life. Honestly, that's what I would have told you because that's what my conscious awareness at the time was. So to make room for something new to be shown to you, you do feel kind of silly at first because you haven't done it or you think there's no way. Just those little steps of just asking for guidance in how to proceed and taking steps forward that are peaceful and kind to yourself, those little gestures aren't so little, really. And that's the thing about when you have taught me about how love will never attack your mind. It's never going to force you to accept something you're not ready to accept. It meets you where you are. And that was what I experienced, was God was like ready to give me the BMW. And I was like, no, I can't. Do you know who you're giving this to? And so God was like, okay, cool. You're not ready? No worries. Okay, cool. I'll just wait till you're ready. And then I, got to experience for myself what else was out there for that amount. And then all of a sudden it came in at just the right amount. And so it kept getting easier. When you asked me to share a miracle story, just picking one was so hard because I've learned how to witness miracles, because they're happening all the time. It's just that I'm either open to joining with them or I let them pass me by. And it's very interesting, part of that process. And, and all the people too that wind up getting to enjoy being part of that process too. It's exciting. I think that in closing, my heartfelt wish for you this holiday season and just really every day is to just remember that anything is possible and that the miracle, it's already here. And our part is to just notice when we're not experiencing love and miracles and are shown how to let those in and how to see them. And to just know that you don't have to be magical or special or super spiritual. You just get to be willing, willing to see it differently. So I just wish everyone so many miracles today and every day. I mean, I've just seen entire workplace environments transform. Relationships that were so toxic completely heal and transform. And it's just amazing. I get so excited now. I text you all the time, Robin, with, I got a new miracle story, because it keeps coming in these different ways. And that's really neat too. I've learned not to get hung up on like the material ones, but I needed that one. So that was a good one. And the other thing that was interesting too that I left out in telling the story was that sometimes I was asked to do nothing at all. Sometimes the guidance was go to the beach, which was like so opposite of what my to-do list looked like, right? And then sometimes I was asked to do things, like I felt a push to reach out or connect with someone. There were moments where, yeah, there was to be done, but I got a sense of what that was. And then other times it was like, no, just chillax, baby.